The old clock in the Harper kitchen ticked with a tired rhythm, its brass pendulum swaying like a heartbeat that refused to die. The early morning light slid through the blinds, striping the oak table in faded gold. A kettle hissed softly on the stove, and the smell of fresh coffee beans clung to the air. Robert Harper sat at the table, his back straight despite the ache in his bones. At 68, life had carved deep lines into his face, but his pale blue eyes were still sharp. He wore a navy wool cardigan, buttoned halfway, the kind his late wife used to knit for him in winters past. His weathered hands rested on the table, steady but tense, as though waiting for something. Across the counter, his only son moved with unusual care. Daniel Harper, 34, dark hair slicked back, eyes restless, was stirring sugar into 2 ceramic mugs. His movements should have been ordinary, but something about the stiffness in his shoulders betrayed him. Robert's gaze narrowed. He had seen enough lies in his years to recognize one being brewed right in front of him. The spoon clinked lightly against porcelain. Daniel's hand hesitated as he reached for a small vial, half concealed by the coffee tin. It was quick, almost imperceptible, but Robert caught it. The faint tilt, the subtle pour, the hiss of liquid dissolving into one mug. A strange calm washed over Robert's chest. His heart did not thunder, nor did he gasp in alarm. He simply watched. Daniel set the mugs down with a practiced smile. "Here you go, Dad," he said, his tone light, too light. "You always say coffee tastes better when someone else makes it." Robert's eyes lingered on his son's face. A forced grin. A flicker of anticipation hiding behind casual words. It was all there. The doorbell rang. The sound split the kitchen air like a blade. Daniel stiffened, then forced a chuckle. "I'll get that," he muttered, already moving toward the hallway. The second he disappeared from view, Robert's hand moved. Silent. Swift. He slid his mug across the table and switched it with the one set closer to Daniel's chair. The ceramics scraped faintly against the wood, but the sound was swallowed by the hum of the kettle. And then Robert sat back, hands folded, as if nothing had happened. The hallway carried Daniel's muffled voice. "Yeah, just leave it by the door." His footsteps returned, heavy but rushed. He came back into the kitchen, forced casualness plastered on his face. "Just the mailman." He slid into the chair across from Robert, pushing the mug forward. Robert lifted it, felt the warmth seep into his palms. His lips didn't touch the rim. Not yet. Instead, his eyes studied his son, those restless eyes, the slight tremor in his fingers. Daniel raised his mug first. He took a deep sip, throat working, Adam's apple bobbing. For a heartbeat, silence ruled the room. Then Daniel blinked rapidly. His hand twitched. The mug wobbled in his grip. Coffee splashed over the rim, onto his knuckles. He hissed, nearly dropping it. His chair screeched back as he staggered. The mug hit the table's edge, shattering, spilling scalding liquid across his lap. "Ack!" Daniel's scream cut the morning calm. He shoved back, clutching at his thighs, eyes wide. But the burn wasn't the only thing. His face flushed, then drained pale. His breaths came shallow, uneven. Robert didn't move. He sat, unmoving as stone, his gaze steady on his son. Daniel's panic spiraled. "Dad," he gasped, voice trembling. "Something's wrong." He clutched his chest, eyes darting around the kitchen. I don't." Robert placed his mug down slowly, deliberately. He leaned forward, his tone quiet, almost gentle. "What's the matter, son? You don't look well." Daniel's eyes flicked to the table, to the mug, to his father's calm stare. Realization clawed at his face. His lips parted in shock. "Dad, you switched them." Robert said nothing. His silence was an iron weight. The morning light shifted across the table, highlighting the steam rising from the broken mug shards on the floor. The smell of coffee, bitter, burnt, clung to the air. Daniel staggered, grabbing the counter for support. Sweat dotted his forehead. His breathing hitched, frantic. It wasn't what you think, his words tangled, collapsing under the weight of fear. Robert rose slowly from his chair. His joints ached, but his movements were steady, measured. He stepped closer, his shadow stretching across the kitchen tiles. I saw you, Robert murmured. Every drop. Every motion. Did you think I wouldn't notice? Daniel shook his head violently, his eyes darting like a trapped animal. No, it wasn't, Dad, please, it was just, he stumbled, his knees buckling. It wasn't poison, just a. His words dissolved into a cough. He clutched the edge of the sink, knuckles white, chest heaving. Robert's eyes softened, not with pity, but with the ache of betrayal that had been years in the making. His voice was low, trembling with restrained fury. I gave you everything, Daniel. Every chance. And this is what you put in my cup. Daniel froze, caught in his father's stare. The silence between them was heavier than the ticking clock, heavier than the air thick with steam and bitterness. And for the first time in years, Robert felt a strange sense of control. He hadn't chosen this battle, but now, the war had been brought to his table. The clock struck 7:03. And nothing in the Harper household would ever be the same again. The kitchen no longer felt like home. Steam curled from the broken shards of porcelain on the floor, and the sharp smell of scorched coffee clung to the air like smoke after a fire. Daniel's scream still echoed in Robert's ears, high-pitched and raw, not from the burn alone but from something deeper, fear. His son stumbled back against the counter, clutching his lap where the hot coffee had splashed. His hands trembled, his breaths uneven, eyes wide and desperate. Robert stood motionless by the table. His face was calm, almost unreadable, but his silence was heavier than any words. Dad, Daniel's voice cracked, his lips quivering as if they had forgotten how to form sentences. Dad, it's not what you think. Robert tilted his head slightly, his pale eyes fixed on him. Isn't it? His voice was soft, but the words cut through the air like a blade. Daniel swallowed hard. He was sweating now, beads forming on his forehead. I didn't mean, his words tangled, collapsing into half sentences. His eyes flicked to the two mugs still on the table, one upright, untouched, steaming quietly in front of Robert's chair, and the other shattered, spilling across the tile. His breathing grew shallow. His chest rose and fell in erratic bursts. He pressed one hand against the countertop to steady himself, the other gripping his thigh where red blotches from the scalding burn already glowed angry against his skin. Robert finally moved. He bent down, picked up a shard of the broken mug, and turned it in his hand. Coffee dripped down his fingers. His voice was low when he spoke again. You thought I wouldn't notice? That I wouldn't see you tip something into my cup? His eyes lifted to Daniel's face. I've watched you since you were a boy. Do you really believe I wouldn't recognize when your hands are shaking? Daniel froze, caught. His mouth opened, closed, then opened again like a fish gasping on dry land. It wasn't poison, Dad. I swear. It was just something to calm you down. Robert raised a brow. Calm me down? He let out a sharp breath that almost sounded like a laugh. Is that what you call it now? Daniel's eyes darted to the floor. His chest heaved. His whole body seemed to shrink under the weight of his father's gaze. The ticking clock filled the silence between them. The sound was deafening now. Robert stepped closer, his cardigan brushing against the edge of the table. He placed the shard of the mug gently back on the counter and straightened. You want to tell me the truth, Robert said softly, but the softness was deceptive. It was the kind of softness that forced confessions. Daniel licked his lips nervously. His voice cracked as he tried to find the right words. He hesitated, fear plain in his eyes. It was just a sedative. That's all. Just enough to make you sleep. Robert's jaw tightened. He said nothing, but his silence pressed down like a vice. Daniel's words tumbled out, rushed, desperate. I wasn't going to hurt you, Dad. I swear. I needed you to be out for a while. Just a few hours. That's all. Robert finally spoke, his tone calm but icy. Out? And what would you do while I was out? Daniel looked away, his voice dropping. I needed some of your paperwork. That's all. Robert's eyes narrowed. His voice stayed even, but each syllable was sharp. Paperwork. He let the word hang, the way a judge might let a charge hang before passing sentence. The kind of paperwork you only get someone to sign when they're not fully awake? Daniel's lips trembled. It's not like that. Then what is it like? Robert pressed, stepping closer. His son shrank back. His whole frame looked smaller now, almost childlike. It's about the house. The insurance. Just a few things that would make it easier if... He cut himself off too late. Robert's eyes hardened. If what? Daniel's silence said everything. For a long moment, Robert didn't move. His face betrayed nothing. The steam from the coffee rose between them like smoke on a battlefield. When he spoke again, his voice was a low whisper, dangerous in its restraint. I worked 2 jobs for that roof over your head. I skipped meals so you could eat. I sold my wedding ring so you could finish school. And you, his voice cracked for the first time, raw emotion seeping through. You slip a vial into my cup and call it paperwork? Daniel's knees gave out. He slumped into the nearest chair, his head in his hands. His voice was muffled, shaking. I didn't want to, I just thought. Robert's fists clenched at his sides. The betrayal hit deeper than any blade. His own blood, the son he had raised alone after his wife's death, was plotting against him. The weight of that truth pressed into Robert's chest until he felt he could hardly breathe. But beneath the ache, another feeling grew, something sharper, colder. A resolve. He would not confront this with anger alone. No. This betrayal required patience. A plan. And so, Robert stepped back, his voice calm again, almost eerily so. Drink your coffee, Daniel. His son's head snapped up, fear etched across his face. What? Robert's eyes were steady, his tone commanding. Drink it. Every last drop. The clock struck 7:05. Daniel's breathing quickened. His hand shook as it reached for the upright mug, the one that had been meant for his father. And Robert watched in silence, every second of it searing into his memory, knowing this was only the beginning. The air in the kitchen was thick, almost suffocating, as Daniel's hand hovered over the mug. His fingers trembled, sweat glistening on his brow. He couldn't bring himself to lift it. The silence between father and son stretched like a taut rope, threatening to snap with the slightest movement. Then, another sound. The doorbell rang again. Both men froze. The sharp chime echoed down the hallway, cutting through the tension like a blade. Robert didn't move. His piercing eyes stayed locked on Daniel. Go, he said quietly. Answer it. Daniel hesitated, his lips parting as though he wanted to protest. But his father's gaze brooked no argument. He wiped his sweaty palms on his jeans, shoved himself out of the chair, and staggered toward the hallway. The sound of the door opening filled the silence. Robert tilted his head, straining to hear. A man's voice drifted inside. Firm. Professional. Delivery for Mr. Robert Harper. Important documents, signature required. Robert's eyes narrowed. He hadn't requested any deliveries. His chest tightened with unease. Daniel's voice came next, hurried and too eager. Yeah, that's me. I can sign for him. Robert rose from his chair, the movement slow but deliberate. His joints ached, but fury gave him strength. He stepped into the hallway just in time to see Daniel blocking the doorway, shoulders squared, hand already reaching for the clipboard the courier held. The courier looked past Daniel, spotting Robert. Mr. Harper? Robert's voice was steady. Yes. That's me. Daniel's eyes widened. His hand froze halfway to the clipboard. Dad, it's just some routine stuff, I was gonna. Robert's hand shot out, gripping the edge of the clipboard before Daniel could. His eyes never left his son's face. "I'll sign my own papers." The courier blinked, sensing the tension. He handed over the clipboard. "I'll need your signature here, sir." Robert scanned the top page. The words blurred slightly, but the bold header was clear enough: Healthcare Directive, Primary Beneficiary. His stomach dropped. His eyes flicked to Daniel, who stood rigid, his face pale. Robert flipped to the next page. Life insurance adjustment, immediate authorization required. His blood turned to ice. He looked at Daniel again, really looked. The sweat, the restless eyes, the way his lips pressed into a thin line. Robert signed nothing. Instead, he handed the clipboard back. "I'll review these with my attorney before signing." The courier hesitated, glancing between father and son. Of course, sir. I'll leave them with you." He slid the envelope into Robert's hand, then retreated quickly, sensing the storm brewing in the doorway. The door shut. Silence. Robert stood with the envelope in hand, the weight of it pressing against his palm like a loaded gun. He turned slowly, his gaze landing on Daniel. "You arranged this," he said quietly. Daniel's throat worked as he swallowed. "Dad, You set it up for me to be unconscious." Robert's voice sharpened. "So you could put my name on dotted lines I'd never see." Daniel's composure cracked. He looked away, rubbing the back of his neck. Things are tight right now. You don't understand." Robert stepped closer, his voice cutting. "Tight? Is that what you call it when a son tries to steal his father's life out from under him?" Daniel flinched as though struck. "It's not like that. I was just gonna make things easier. For when you're not around anymore." The words hung heavy. "Cruel." Robert's breath caught, not in surprise but in heartbreak. "You want me gone that badly?" Daniel's jaw tightened. His voice dropped, bitter. "I'm drowning, Dad. The debts, they're choking me. The house, the insurance, it could fix everything. You wouldn't even feel it." Robert stared at him, every line of his face hard with disbelief. "Wouldn't feel it? Because I'd be dead?" Daniel froze, guilt flashing in his eyes. The silence stretched until the old clock ticked again, each sound like a hammer against the walls. Robert's voice, when it came, was low and trembling with restrained fury. "I gave you everything I had. I broke my back to make sure you never knew hunger, never knew cold. And this," he shook the envelope. "This is how you repay me?" Daniel's lips parted, but no words came. His shoulders slumped, as though crushed by invisible weight. Robert stepped closer until they were face to face. He looked into his son's eyes and saw the truth laid bare, not just desperation, but greed. The kind that rotted a man from the inside. Robert's hand tightened around the envelope. His heart burned with rage, but beneath it, something colder began to stir. "A plan. You've shown me what you are," he whispered. "Now I'll show you what I am." Daniel's face twisted, confusion flickering across it. "Dad, what do you mean?" Robert didn't answer. He walked past him, back into the kitchen, leaving the words to hang like smoke in the air. The broken mug still lay on the floor, shards glittering in the sunlight. Robert crouched, picking one up, turning it in his hand. His reflection stared back at him in the glossy white ceramic, fractured and distorted. Behind him, Daniel shifted uneasily in the doorway. "Dad, you're not gonna tell anyone, right? We can just forget this." Robert set the shard down carefully. He didn't turn around when he answered. "Some things," he said softly, "can never be forgotten." The clock struck 7:15. And Robert Harper, betrayed father, began to imagine what justice might taste like. The kitchen floor still smelled of scorched coffee, but now the envelope of legal documents sat on the table like a ticking bomb. Robert hadn't touched it again since he laid it down, but his eyes flicked to it every few minutes, as if it were daring him to open it. Daniel lingered by the counter, pacing, chewing his thumbnail. He looked like a boy again, cornered, guilty, terrified of a punishment he couldn't yet name. A sharp knock broke the silence. Not the doorbell this time, but knuckles against wood. Robert glanced at Daniel, who froze mid-step. Then he walked to the door himself. Standing outside was Mrs. Evelyn Carter, the nurse who lived next door. 62, brisk, silver hair pulled into a bun, her sharp eyes missed nothing. She held a folded newspaper in one hand. "Morning, Robert," she said, her voice carrying the clipped authority of someone who'd spent a lifetime in hospital wards. I heard shouting. "Everything all right?" Robert hesitated. His instinct was to shield his shame, but something in her steady gaze broke through. He stepped aside. "Come in." Evelyn walked into the kitchen. The sharp smell of coffee hit her instantly. She glanced at the broken mug shards on the floor, then at Daniel, whose face had gone ghost pale. Her eyes narrowed. "What happened here?" Robert gestured to the table. "Sit. Please." Reluctantly, she lowered herself into a chair, setting her paper down. Robert poured her a glass of water, his hands steady despite the storm in his chest. Finally, he said it. "My son slipped something into my coffee this morning." The words hung heavy in the air. Evelyn's eyes sharpened, flicking instantly to Daniel. "That's a lie." Daniel burst out, too quickly. His voice cracked. I didn't." Evelyn raised a single eyebrow. "Sit down, Daniel." Something in her tone made him obey. He slumped into the chair across from her, his knee bouncing nervously. Evelyn reached across the table, taking the intact mug Robert had refused to drink from. She lifted it to her nose, inhaled. Her brow furrowed. Then she dipped the tip of her finger into the cooling liquid, touched it lightly to her tongue. The silence was deafening. Her face tightened. "Benzodiazepine," she said flatly. "A sedative. Strong dose. Not lethal on its own, but it would knock a man out for hours. Long enough to stage a fall. Long enough to sign papers without remembering." She set the mug down with a hard clink. Her eyes bore into Daniel's. "What were you thinking?" Daniel's lips trembled. He shook his head, his voice a desperate whisper. I didn't mean for it to go that far." Robert's hands clenched on the edge of the table. His voice was low, trembling with restrained fury. "You didn't mean? You arranged documents to be delivered to the house this morning. Life insurance. Healthcare directives. You timed it, Daniel." Evelyn turned to Robert sharply. "Documents?" He slid the envelope across the table. She opened it, her nurse's steadiness replaced by something colder, angrier. Her eyes scanned the pages, lips pressing into a thin line. Finally, she looked up. "This isn't just careless. It's calculated." Daniel's composure shattered. He leaned forward, his voice cracking. "I'm drowning, okay? The debts, they're eating me alive. I just thought, if I could get things sorted." Robert cut him off with a glare that silenced the room. "By stealing my life while I'm still breathing?" Daniel shrank back, eyes darting anywhere but his father's face. Evelyn sat back, folding her arms. Her voice was measured, each word heavy with disdain. "I've seen families tear each other apart over inheritance. But this?" She shook her head. "Drugging your own father to steal signatures? That's not desperation. That's betrayal." Robert looked at her, his eyes weary but burning. "I needed someone else to see it. To know I'm not imagining things." "You're not," Evelyn said firmly. She pushed the mug away from her, as though it physically disgusted her. "This is enough sedative to put a man in a coma if mixed with alcohol or medication. He could have fallen, cracked his head, never woken up. You're lucky you caught it." Robert turned his gaze back to Daniel, who sat trembling, sweat dripping down his temple. "Do you hear that?" His voice cracked, anger seeping through his calm exterior. "She says I could have died." Daniel buried his face in his hands. His shoulders shook, though whether from guilt or fear, neither Robert nor Evelyn could tell. The clock ticked past 7:30. Robert stood slowly, his cardigan hanging loose, his figure casting a long shadow across the kitchen. "You wanted me weak," he said quietly. "You wanted me quiet. But now I see you. Clearly." Daniel lifted his head, eyes red, voice desperate. "Dad, please, you don't understand. I just wanted to fix things. Just wanted to make it easier." Robert leaned forward, his palms pressing flat on the table. His voice dropped to a whisper that carried more weight than a scream. "You were ready to bury me alive for a payday." Daniel's lip quivered, but he said nothing. Evelyn stood too, her hand resting on Robert's shoulder. "You don't need to decide tonight," she said softly. But her eyes never left Daniel. "What you do need to remember is this: he's shown you what he's capable of. And people who cross that line rarely stop at just one attempt." Her words sank deep into Robert's chest. He nodded slowly. When she left a few minutes later, silence fell again. The house felt colder. Smaller. Robert sat back down, his hands clasped tight in front of him. He didn't look at Daniel. He didn't need to. Because the truth was out now, confirmed, undeniable, witnessed. And once truth is known, it demands a consequence. The kitchen had gone still again after Evelyn left, but the silence was different now. It wasn't awkward, it wasn't heavy, it was suffocating. Robert sat at the table, his hands folded, his gaze fixed on nothing, while Daniel paced back and forth near the window like a man trapped in his own skin. The air smelled of bitter coffee and betrayal. Daniel muttered under his breath, as if speaking to himself might undo what had just happened. "She doesn't know everything, she doesn't. Dad, she doesn't understand the pressure I'm under." Robert didn't answer. He just let the words hang in the air, letting his son choke on them. Finally, Robert rose. His knees ached, but his steps were steady. He moved to the counter, picked up a dish towel, and began wiping the spilled coffee from the tiles. He cleaned slowly, methodically, as though the act of scrubbing away the mess gave him control over something in this chaos. Behind him, Daniel stopped pacing. The sound of his phone buzzed in the silence. Robert froze, head tilted slightly. The phone buzzed again. And then again. Daniel cursed under his breath. He pulled it from his pocket, the glow of the screen illuminating his pale face. He turned slightly away from his father, but the reflection of the phone lit up in the oven's glass door. And Robert saw it. The name. Mara. A message preview glared bright. Did he drink? Move him to the shower. Robert's breath caught. His hands tightened around the towel until his knuckles whitened. He turned slowly, quietly, his eyes narrowing. Daniel's thumbs flew across the screen, tapping a rushed reply. He didn't realize his father was watching him in the reflection. Another buzz. Another message. Policy pays on falls. Don't screw this up. Robert's chest turned cold. It wasn't just desperation. It wasn't just a sedative. This was a conspiracy. And Mara, whoever she was part of it. Who's Mara? Robert's voice cut the air like a knife. Daniel jumped, nearly dropping his phone. He spun around, his face pale, his mouth opening and closing like he'd been caught stealing from the offering plate in church. W.H. Watt. Robert's gaze was steady. Your phone just lit up. Mara. She wants to know if I drank. Daniel swallowed hard. His hand clutched the phone tighter, as if holding it close might make the truth disappear. She's no one. Just a friend. Robert's voice grew sharper. Friends don't text instructions about insurance policies. Daniel's face crumpled, his defenses collapsing faster than he could rebuild them. Dad, please, just listen, I didn't mean. Robert stepped closer. His eyes locked on his son's, cold and unblinking. Tell me who she is. Daniel shook his head, stammering. She's someone helping me. She knows about debts. She said she could fix things. She had a plan. Robert's jaw tightened. And the plan was to drug me? To drag me into the shower and stage a fall? Daniel's lips quivered. His voice cracked. It wasn't supposed to be like that. She said it wouldn't hurt you. Just make it look like an accident so the insurance. His words broke off as Robert slammed his hand against the table, the sound echoing through the small kitchen. Do you hear yourself? Robert's voice thundered now, raw with both fury and heartbreak. You were ready to sell your father's life for a payday. And you let someone else whisper it into your ear like it was nothing. Daniel flinched, eyes wide, breath ragged. He looked like a boy again, terrified, guilty, but Robert no longer saw a boy. He saw a man who had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. Robert turned away, his chest heaving. He walked to the window, staring out at the street where sunlight spilled over the quiet houses. His reflection stared back at him in the glass, pale and lined, but steady. Strong. Behind him, Daniel's voice wavered. Dad. I didn't want this. I didn't want it to go this far. She said it was the only way. Robert didn't turn. The only way to what? Daniel's voice cracked again. To fix everything. To pay off the people who are coming after me. You don't understand, Dad. They'll kill me if I don't pay. Robert's shoulders tensed. He finally turned, his eyes blazing. And your answer was to kill me first? Daniel stumbled back, his phone clattering from his hand onto the floor. The screen cracked, the message thread still glowing. Robert bent down slowly, picked it up, and read the words with his own eyes. Did he drink? Move him to the shower. The next message pulsed beneath it. Policy pays on falls. Don't screw this up. He set the phone down carefully on the counter, as though it were an explosive. Everything makes sense now, Robert said quietly. His voice carried a new weight, a calmness that wasn't calm at all, but lethal. The sedative. The paperwork. The delivery man. And Mara. He looked up at Daniel, who was trembling by the doorway, his back pressed against the frame as though he wished he could melt into it. Robert's voice was steady now. Controlled. You've shown me the truth, son. And the truth is this, he stepped closer, his eyes never leaving Daniel's. You're not just my betrayer. You're my enemy. Daniel's lips parted in shock. He shook his head violently. No, Dad, please, I can explain, I didn't mean it like that. But Robert had already turned away, his mind clicking into place like gears in a machine. He had been a father first, a protector always. But now, for the first time, he would be something else. He would be a judge. And a judge delivers justice. The clock struck 7:45. And Robert Harper knew exactly what his next move would be. The house was unnervingly quiet after the text messages. The only sound was the rhythmic tick of the kitchen clock, each second falling like a hammer on Robert's chest. He sat back at the table, staring at the cracked phone screen still glowing faintly with Mara's words. Did he drink? Move him to the shower. Policy pays on falls. Don't screw this up. The truth couldn't be sharper. His own son wasn't just desperate, he was conspiring, hand in hand with a woman he barely knew, to trade his father's life for money. Daniel shifted near the doorway, wringing his hands, his breathing ragged. He looked like a boy caught red-handed, but Robert knew better now. Boys make mistakes. Men make choices. And Daniel had chosen betrayal. For several minutes, neither spoke. Robert folded his hands, forcing his voice calm, though inside his chest, something stormed. You say you're drowning, Robert said quietly, eyes fixed on the table. You say Mara has the answers. Then let me give you one last chance. Daniel blinked, startled by the softness of his father's tone. What do you mean? Robert finally lifted his gaze. His eyes were sharp now, burning, but his voice carried a dangerous gentleness, like the whisper of a blade before it cuts. I'll help you, he said. We'll go to a notary. We'll do the paperwork properly. Today. Daniel froze, his lips parting in disbelief. You do that? After everything? Robert leaned back, his cardigan sagging against his shoulders. His expression was unreadable, but his words were deliberate. You're my son. And a father doesn't give up that easily. He let the silence stretch before adding, but if we're to do this, it has to be the right way. With witnesses. With signatures that can't be questioned later. Daniel's eyes darted, searching for a trap, but greed flickered beneath his fear. Hope, false and fleeting, sparked in his gaze. So, you'll sign? His voice trembled, eager. Robert's face was stone. I'll sign nothing unless it's in front of a notary. Do you understand? Daniel's shoulders sagged with a shaky exhale. Relief, foolish and desperate, softened his features. Yeah, okay. That's fair. Robert gave the faintest nod. He reached for the phone on the counter and tapped the cracked screen back to life. Daniel's messages with Mara still glowed there. I'll text her, Robert said flatly. Tell her you've convinced me. That it'll happen today. Daniel flinched, but he didn't protest. His silence was consent. Robert typed slowly, each word deliberate, his eyes never leaving his son. He'll sign. Meeting with notary today. Get ready. He set the phone down, the message sent. Daniel's shoulders relaxed. For the first time since the morning began, he almost smiled. Thank you, Dad. You don't know what this means. I swear, once this is done, things will get better. I'll pay off the debts, Robert cut him off with a raised hand. Save your promises. His voice was icy. They mean nothing now. Daniel swallowed, the fragile smile dying on his lips. Robert rose from the table. His body felt heavy, his age pressing into his joints, but his mind had never been sharper. He walked to the cupboard above the sink, opened it, and retrieved an old tin box. Inside, neatly folded, were business cards, receipts, and scraps of numbers scribbled on paper. From the pile, he pulled one card, Detective Marcus Hill, Financial Crimes Division. An old friend, someone he hadn't spoken to in years, but a man who still owed him a favor. He slipped the card into his pocket. Then he looked at Daniel, who stood watching him with wide, uneasy eyes. We'll do it my way, Robert said. And if Mara's as clever as she thinks, she'll be there too. Daniel shifted nervously. Do we have to bring her in? She's just helping from a distance. Robert's gaze cut into silence. If she's pulling your strings, then she'll face me as well. Do you understand? Daniel's jaw tightened. He nodded, but reluctantly. The hours crawled. The house felt smaller, walls pressing in as father and son moved around each other like enemies forced into truce. Robert brewed another pot of coffee, this time with his own eyes never leaving the cups, and drank it slowly, deliberately, letting Daniel see every sip. By late morning, the plan was in motion. Robert had called, made arrangements, told Daniel they would meet a notary and a courier at the house. What Daniel didn't know was that Robert's quiet call to Detective Hill had set something else into motion. 2 plainclothes officers would arrive, disguised, not to notarize but to witness. And to record. Robert's trap was being built piece by piece, and Daniel was too blinded by greed to notice the bars forming around him. By noon, Daniel sat hunched on the couch, gnawing at his nails, while Robert stood at the window, arms folded. Outside, the street lay still, children's bikes leaning against fences, the hum of lawnmowers in the distance. Daniel spoke suddenly, his voice almost childlike. Dad, you're not still mad, right? Once this is done, you'll see, it'll all make sense. Robert turned his head, his eyes narrowing. He studied his son for a long, silent moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm. Almost gentle. Mad? He shook his head slowly. No, Daniel. I'm not mad anymore. Daniel's shoulders eased slightly. Good. Because. Robert's next words cut him like a knife. Mad is what fathers feel. Justice is what judges deliver. Daniel froze, his breath catching in his throat. Robert turned back to the window, his reflection in the glass sharp and cold. The judge had taken his seat. And soon, the trial would begin. The clock struck noon. And with it, Robert Harper's plan shifted from survival to vengeance. By the time the knock came at the door, the house no longer felt like Robert's. It felt like a stage. The curtains had been drawn halfway, letting in strips of afternoon sun that sliced across the living room like spotlights. The coffee table was cleared, save for the envelope of legal documents resting neatly in the center. 2 fresh mugs of coffee steamed beside it, poured deliberately by Robert, identical, untainted, their presence both casual and ominous. Daniel sat on the edge of the couch, tapping his foot against the carpet, his hands clasped together so tightly that his knuckles whitened. His eyes darted to the door at every sound, restless, feverish with hope and fear. Robert stood near the window, arms folded across his chest, face carved in stone. He had dressed deliberately in a pressed shirt, his cardigan replaced by a jacket that gave him an air of authority. To Daniel, he looked less like a father and more like a man preparing to preside over judgment. The knock came again. Firm. Rhythmic. Daniel shot to his feet. That must be them. His voice cracked with nervous eagerness. Robert didn't move. Open it, he said simply. Daniel hurried to the door, his movements jerky, almost boyish. He pulled it open to reveal 2 strangers, a man and a woman, mid-40s, dressed neatly in business attire, briefcases in hand. Their smiles were polite, practiced. "Mr. Harper?" the man asked. His tone was professional, steady. "Yes," Robert answered, stepping forward. "Come in." The pair entered smoothly, their eyes sweeping the room with quiet efficiency. To Daniel, they looked like notary officials, calm, deliberate, ordinary. But Robert knew better. Detective Hill had promised him officers who could blend into any living room in America, and these 2 fit the part perfectly. "This won't take long," the woman said, placing her briefcase on the coffee table. She smiled at Robert, but her gaze flicked, sharp, assessing, toward Daniel. Daniel hovered nervously, shifting from foot to foot. "We just need Dad's signature, right? That's all?" The man gave him a nod, professional but cool. "That's right. Everything above board." Robert watched closely. Daniel's shoulders loosened slightly, relief flickering across his face. He sat down, leaning forward like a gambler who thought his luck was finally turning. The woman clicked open her briefcase, producing a neat stack of papers, nearly identical to the ones Daniel had arranged earlier. Only these documents were something very different, pre-marked with clauses, designed to catch Daniel's words, his pressure, his intent. Every second of what was about to unfold would be recorded by the tiny device hidden in her pen. Robert poured coffee into the mugs, his movements slow, deliberate. "Refreshments for everyone," he said evenly. The man accepted his cup with a nod. The woman, too, took hers, setting it carefully by the papers. Daniel hesitated, eyeing the 2 identical mugs left on the table. Robert caught the flicker of tension in his son's face, the memory of the morning's switch, the fear of repeating it. Daniel swallowed, forcing a smile. He grabbed the nearest mug and sipped quickly, as if to prove something. Robert hid his own faint smirk. The stage was set. For the next half hour, the so-called notaries walked them through the papers. The woman explained each clause clearly, her voice calm and professional, her pen scratching steadily across the page as she marked points for Robert to initial later. Daniel grew restless. His patience was razor-thin. He leaned forward, pointing. "Dad, this is the healthcare directive. Just sign here, right? That's the main one." The man raised a hand, stopping him gently. "All in due time. We go page by page." Daniel forced a laugh, but his eyes betrayed him. They darted between his father and the papers, his anxiety rising like steam from boiling water. Robert remained silent. He watched. He waited. He let his son dig the hole deeper with every twitch of his hands, every nervous word spilling out of his mouth. At last, the woman paused, tapping her pen lightly against the page. "Before we proceed, we need to confirm something important. Mr. Harper," she looked directly at Robert, "are you signing these willingly, with full understanding of what they mean?" Robert leaned forward, his voice steady. "I understand perfectly." He let his eyes lock on Daniel as he added, "And I am signing of my own free will." Daniel exhaled audibly, relief flooding his face. He even smiled, the kind of smile that didn't belong to a son but to a man who thought he'd finally won. But then the woman continued. "And is there anyone pressuring you to sign against your will?" The silence snapped tight. Daniel's smile faltered. Wait, what kind of question is that? Nobody's pressuring him. Why would you?" Robert didn't answer immediately. He let the weight of the pause stretch, the kind of pause that buries a guilty man under its silence. Finally, he spoke, his tone slow, deliberate, heavy. "My son believes money is worth more than blood." Daniel froze. His mouth opened, but no words came. The woman's pen scratched quickly across the page, recording the statement. The man leaned back in his chair, his gaze sharp now, no longer pretending to be just a notary. Robert continued, his voice unwavering. "He tried to drug me this morning. Tried to make me sign these very papers without knowing. And he didn't act alone. He's working with someone named Mara." The words landed like thunder. Daniel shot up from the couch, his face twisting in panic. "That's not true. He's lying. Dad, tell them, you're confused, you don't understand." Robert stood too, his frame tall and commanding despite his age. "I understand perfectly. You betrayed me." His voice cracked, emotion finally breaking through the steel. "You tried to bury me alive for a payout." The officers' masks of professionalism slipped away. The man snapped his briefcase shut, revealing the badge tucked discreetly inside. "Daniel Harper," he said firmly, his voice suddenly carrying the weight of law, "sit down." Daniel's face drained of color. What? The woman placed her pen carefully on the table, her own badge flashing. "Everything you've said is on record. We've heard enough." Daniel stumbled backward, his voice cracking. "Dad, you set me up?" Robert's eyes were wet, but his stare was unflinching. "No, son. You set yourself up. I just gave you the rope." The clock struck 1 o'clock. And in the Harper house, the trial had begun. Daniel's world had collapsed in seconds. The moment the badges flashed, the illusion shattered. His body shook as though the carpet had been yanked from under his feet. The notaries were officers. The paperwork was a trap. And his father, the man he had tried to outmaneuver, had been 3 steps ahead all along. He sank into the couch, his chest heaving, his words tumbling out in ragged gasps. "Dad, please, you don't understand. Mara said it wouldn't be like this." "Mara," Robert repeated, his voice low, steady, each syllable dipped in disdain. "The woman who told you to drug me. The woman who told you to stage my death." Daniel winced, as though every word struck him physically. "She said it was the only way. That we'd both be free after. That nobody would suspect." The officer cut him off. "That's enough." His tone was sharp, professional, leaving no room for excuses. He looked at Robert. "We can take it from here." But Robert raised a hand. His face was calm, but his eyes burned. "No. Not yet." Everyone in the room stilled. Even the officers paused. Robert turned toward the counter, where the 2 untouched mugs of coffee still steamed faintly. He picked them up, carrying them slowly back to the table, placing one in front of Daniel and one before himself. The action was simple, but the weight behind it was suffocating. "Drink," Robert said softly. Daniel's head jerked up. His eyes widened. "What? You tried to put me to sleep this morning." Robert's voice was calm, almost eerily so. "Now I want to see if you can swallow your own medicine." The room was silent except for the faint hiss of the kettle on the stove. The officers exchanged wary glances but said nothing. They, too, wanted to see how far this would go. Daniel's throat bobbed. His trembling hand hovered over the cup. "Dad, please. I didn't mean to." "Drink," Robert repeated, firmer this time. His eyes were unflinching. "Show me what courage you have left." For a long, agonizing moment, Daniel didn't move. His breathing grew harsher, ragged, until sweat dotted his forehead. Then, slowly, his hand wrapped around the mug. He lifted it with shaking fingers, brought it to his lips, and swallowed. A gulp. Then another. His chest heaved as the hot liquid slid down. Robert didn't blink. He watched his son drink every last drop, the faint clink of the mug on the table echoing in the silence. "Good," Robert said finally, leaning back. "Now we're even. 1 cup for you, 1 cup for me. No tricks this time." Daniel collapsed forward, burying his face in his hands. His body shook, with fear, with shame, with the crushing weight of knowing he had been cornered. The woman officer leaned forward, her tone clipped. "Mr. Harper, with your permission, we'll need to involve this Mara directly. If she's orchestrating, we'll pull her in." Robert's eyes never left Daniel. "How do we make her come?" Daniel muttered through his hands, his voice broken. "She's expecting me to call. To tell her it's done. That you signed." Robert nodded slowly, turning to the officers. "Then let him call. Let her walk straight into the trap she set." The officers exchanged a glance, then gave the faintest nod. Robert leaned forward, his voice steady but edged like steel. "You're going to invite her here, Daniel. Today. And if you try to warn her," he let the threat hang, unfinished but clear. Daniel's face lifted, streaked with sweat and panic. "Dad, she's dangerous. You don't know her." "Then all the more reason to see her with my own eyes." Robert's gaze hardened. "Make the call." Daniel's fingers fumbled as he picked up his cracked phone. His hands shook so violently he could barely unlock the screen. The officers sat quietly, their pens discreetly recording every word, every sound. Robert stood behind his son, his shadow looming over him like judgment itself. The phone rang once. Twice. Then a woman's voice, smooth but sharp, answered. "Well? Did he drink?" Daniel swallowed. His voice trembled. "It's done." He signed. "You should come. We need to talk through the rest." A pause on the other end. Then a low chuckle. "Good boy. I'll be there within the hour." The line went dead. Daniel's shoulders slumped, his phone slipping from his fingers onto the table. Robert leaned down, his voice a whisper by his son's ear. "Good boy," he echoed, his words heavy with scorn. "That's what you've become to her. Not a man. Not a son. Just a dog who obeys." Daniel flinched, but he didn't reply. The house grew tense again, but this time it was a different tension. It wasn't just father versus son anymore. Now, another piece was moving into place. Mara. Robert paced slowly, his hands behind his back. He glanced at the officers. "She thinks she's coming to collect victory. She'll find something else." The man officer nodded. "We'll be ready. Audio, video, everything." He adjusted the small device clipped discreetly inside his jacket. "You just play your part, Mr. Harper. Let her think she's in control." Robert's lips curved into the faintest of grim smiles. "Oh, she'll think it. Right up until the moment she learns otherwise." In the corner, Daniel sat hunched, head in his hands, his voice breaking in whispers only he could hear. "What have I done? God, what have I done?" Robert watched him but felt nothing. No pity. No comfort. The son he'd raised was gone, swallowed by greed and weakness. All that remained was a man who needed to face the weight of his choices. The clock ticked past 2 o'clock. And somewhere out there, Mara was already on her way, following the trail she believed she had laid herself. Robert poured himself another cup of coffee, the steam rising in slow curls. He lifted it, sipped, and set it down, his voice calm, almost quiet. One betrayal was enough. The second will be the last. The house was heavy with anticipation. The walls seemed to listen, the clock ticked louder than ever, and even the air itself felt like it was holding its breath. Robert sat at the head of the table, upright and watchful, while the two undercover officers pretended to busy themselves with paperwork. Daniel sat slumped on the couch, pale and sweating, his hands twitching as though he were itching to run. Every few seconds he would glance toward the door, then toward his father, then back at the floor, chewing his lip until it bled. When the knock came, sharp and certain, Daniel flinched so hard his phone slipped from his hand. Robert didn't move at first. He let the knock echo again before he spoke. "Answer it." Daniel hesitated. "Dad, please." Robert's eyes cut him to silence. So Daniel rose, dragging his feet to the door. When he opened it, sunlight poured into the room, and with it stepped Mara. She was younger than Robert expected, late 20s, maybe early 30s. Black hair in a sleek bob, lips painted dark, and eyes that flicked over the room with sharp calculation. She wore a fitted coat, carried a slim leather bag, and moved like someone who believed the world belonged to her. Her gaze landed on Robert first, then on the strangers at the table. She gave a tight smile. "So, this is him." Daniel's voice cracked. "Mara." But she cut him off with a raised hand. "No names. Not here." She walked further into the room, her heels clicking softly against the floor, her tone low and businesslike. "Has he signed?" Robert leaned back in his chair. "Not yet." Mara tilted her head, studying him like a hawk studies prey. "Then let's not waste time." She dropped her bag onto the table and slid out a pen. "Mr. Harper, you may not realize it, but this is in your best interest. A fall, a quick payout, debts wiped away, your son's life back on track. Clean. Painless. Efficient." The words spilled so casually it made Robert's stomach turn. She spoke of his life as if it were just another number on a spreadsheet. The officers glanced at each other but stayed quiet. Their pens kept moving, capturing every word. Robert's voice was calm, but his eyes burned. "And what do I get out of this arrangement?" Mara smirked faintly. "Peace. A legacy. You won't have to watch your son rot under debt. Isn't that what fathers want? To save their children?" Her words were smooth, almost hypnotic. But Robert saw through them. He glanced at Daniel. His son's head was bowed, shame etched deep into his features. Mara didn't even look at him. She didn't need to, she already owned him. Robert let the silence linger, then asked softly, "And if I refuse?" Mara's smile hardened. "Then you'll keep suffering. And so will he." She nodded toward Daniel. "Do you want to watch him dragged into the street by the people he owes? Because that's the alternative. He won't survive it." Robert's chest tightened, but he showed nothing. "You make it sound like I don't have a choice." Mara leaned forward, her pen clicking. "You don't." The trap was tightening, but Mara didn't see it. She was too confident, too sure of her control. Her voice grew bolder, careless. "He already told me you're old, tired, ready to go. You don't even need to drink anything, you could just slip in the shower, hit your head, and nobody would ask questions. We've staged it before. It works." The words froze the air. Even Daniel's head snapped up, his eyes wide. "Wait, you've done this before?" Mara shot him a sharp look, but the slip had already escaped. The officer's pens scribbled faster. Every word was evidence, but Mara didn't realize she was burying herself. Robert's eyes narrowed. "How many others?" Mara gave a thin smile. "Enough." Daniel looked horrified now, panic written across his face. "You didn't tell me?" "Quiet," Mara snapped, her voice suddenly sharp. "You wanted freedom, didn't you? You wanted out from under them? Then you do what I say." Her dominance silenced him. Daniel looked at his father, his lips trembling, but no words came. Robert leaned forward, his voice low. "So you used him. You fed him poison words, made him believe betraying me was his only way out." Mara didn't flinch. "He came to me. I didn't force him." She smiled coldly. "But I know weakness when I see it. And I use it." The admission hung in the room, raw and unguarded. The female officer set her pen down. "That's enough." Her voice carried steel now. She reached into her jacket, flashing her badge. "Mara, you're under arrest for conspiracy, attempted insurance fraud, and solicitation to commit homicide." Mara's face twisted in shock, then fury. "What?" The male officer stood, already pulling cuffs from his pocket. "Don't move." Daniel froze on the couch, staring at Mara with wide, horrified eyes. You set me up too?" Mara's voice snapped like a whip. "You pathetic little fool. You couldn't even get him to drink a damn cup of coffee." Her words cut deeper than any blade. Daniel clutched his hair, rocking slightly, his voice breaking. "Oh God, what have I done?" Robert stood slowly, his face unreadable. He looked from his son to Mara, then back again. His heart ached, but his resolve was steel. He turned to the officers. "Take her first. He'll face his judgment after." Mara spat curses as the cuffs locked around her wrists, her sleek composure shattering. She fought, but it was useless. The house grew quiet again, save for the sound of her rage echoing down the hallway as the officers led her outside. Daniel sat crumpled on the couch, trembling, his face buried in his hands. He looked like a man who had aged 20 years in an hour. Robert stood over him, his shadow long across the carpet. His voice was quiet, but every word was heavy. "She called you weak. She used you. And she was right." Daniel lifted his tear-streaked face, his voice broken. "Dad. I'm sorry. I thought I could fix everything. I never meant to." Robert cut him off with a raised hand. His voice shook, not with weakness, but with the weight of finality. "You wanted me gone for money. You let her turn you into her pawn. And now, Daniel, now you'll learn what it feels like when the truth drinks you dry." The clock struck 3 o'clock. And Robert Harper knew the final act had only just begun. The front door shut hard behind Mara, the sound of her curses fading as the officers escorted her down the porch steps. For the first time in hours, the Harper house was quiet again. But it wasn't peace. The silence was thick with something darker, the calm before a storm fully breaks. Robert stood in the living room, his back to his son, staring at the envelope of papers still lying on the coffee table. The edges of the documents caught the afternoon light, glowing like the very weapon Daniel had tried to use against him. Behind him, Daniel sat hunched forward, his face buried in his palms. His breathing was shallow, his shoulders trembling. Every so often, he muttered half-words, like a man trying to bargain with himself. "Dad. I didn't mean. I just thought. She said it was the only way." Robert turned slowly. His voice was calm, controlled, but the fire in his eyes made the air feel heavy. "You thought you could take everything from me. But you didn't even bother to learn the law that governs it." Daniel looked up, confused, his red-rimmed eyes glassy with fear. What do you mean?" Robert stepped forward, picking up the envelope. He pulled one sheet free and dropped it onto the table in front of his son. "This," Robert said, tapping the header. "Revocable living trust." Daniel blinked at it, struggling to focus. His lips parted. "Trust? What is this?" Robert's voice sharpened. 2 years ago, I moved the house, the savings, and every asset I have into a living trust. Do you know what that means, Daniel?" His son shook his head slowly, sweat dripping down his temple. "It means you're not the heir to anything. Not directly." And more importantly, Robert leaned closer, his voice low, deliberate, every syllable sharp as glass. It is what's called a Slayer clause. Do you know what that is? Daniel's lips trembled. No. Robert's jaw tightened. It means if an heir tries to harm the person they're inheriting from, if they attempt fraud, violence, anything, he slammed the papers down on the table. They forfeit their share. Permanently. The words hit like a gavel striking wood. Daniel recoiled, his face draining of color. No, you can't. I already did, Robert cut him off, his tone cold. The moment you poured that vial into my coffee, Daniel, you signed away everything yourself. Daniel's voice cracked, shrill with panic. Dad, please, don't do this. I was desperate. I didn't know. You knew enough to hide vials in my kitchen, Robert snapped, his control finally cracking. You knew enough to plan my fall in the shower. You knew enough to make me believe my own son wanted me gone. His voice trembled, thick with grief. And you dare tell me you didn't know? Daniel slid off the couch, dropping to his knees on the carpet. His hands clutched at his father's jacket, his tears streaking down his face. Please, Dad. Don't let them take everything from me. Don't let them throw me in prison. I'll change, I swear I will. Just give me another chance. Robert's hand clenched into a fist, his breath trembling. For a moment, one raw, fleeting moment, he saw the boy Daniel once was. The child who had fallen asleep on his chest after his wife's funeral, the teenager he had cheered for at graduation, the man he had bailed out of debt too many times to count. But then he saw the mug. The vial. The text messages. Mara's smirk. And the truth. You've had every chance, Robert whispered. And you threw them all away. The officers returned, Mara now in their custody. The male officer glanced at Daniel still on his knees and shook his head. Pathetic, he muttered under his breath. The female officer looked at Robert. What do you want to do? Press charges? With the evidence we've gathered, it won't be difficult. Robert stared at his son for a long time. His silence stretched until even the officers grew uneasy. Finally, he straightened, pulling himself free from Daniel's grasp. He's already lost everything. The law will take care of the rest. Daniel collapsed onto the floor, sobbing. His cries echoed through the living room, raw and pitiful. Robert turned away. His heart ached, but his steps were steady. You wanted to write me out of life, he said softly, not looking back. Instead, you wrote yourself out of mine. The clock struck 4 o'clock. And with it, the weight of judgment came crashing down. Daniel's sobs rattled the walls of the Harper house. He knelt on the carpet, his hands clutching the edge of the couch as though it might anchor him to a life already slipping away. His face was blotched red, streaked with tears and sweat. The once cocky tone that had carried him all morning was gone. What remained was a broken man, a child in the body of an adult, stripped of pride and dignity. Dad, please, he choked out, his voice hoarse. Don't let them take me. Don't let them lock me up. You're all I've got left. Robert stood across from him, tall and unyielding, the setting sun outlining his frame in the living room window. His face was carved with sorrow, but his eyes were merciless. All you've got left? Robert's voice was steady but cold. You had me. For 34 years, you had me. And you traded that away for paper and promises whispered by a stranger. Daniel crawled closer, his hands trembling as he reached for his father's shoes. He clutched them desperately, like a drowning man clinging to driftwood. I was stupid. I didn't think it through. Mara, she said it would work, that nobody would get hurt. I just wanted to fix things. Robert looked down at him, his jaw tight. Fix things by burying me? The words struck Daniel harder than a fist. He broke down, pressing his forehead to the floor. His voice cracked into high-pitched desperation. I'll do anything. Rehab, debt counseling, prison work programs, anything. Just don't let them take me away in chains. The officers stood nearby, silent witnesses. The female officer finally spoke, her tone clipped but not unkind. "Mr. Harper, the choice isn't entirely yours anymore. Attempted fraud and conspiracy don't vanish just because of tears." She looked at Daniel. "You'll have to answer for what you did." Daniel's sobs turned into wild panic. He shot up suddenly, clutching his father's arm. "Please! Don't let them take me, Dad. I'm your son. Your blood. Doesn't that mean anything?" Robert's eyes softened, but only for a heartbeat. He placed his hand gently over Daniel's trembling one, gripping it firmly. For a moment, Daniel's face lit with hope. But then Robert spoke, and hope shattered. "Blood means nothing if the heart behind it is rotted." Daniel's knees gave way. He collapsed again, screaming into his hands. The sound was raw, guttural, shaking the walls, as though the house itself mourned the wreckage of a family. The male officer stepped forward, his badge glinting in the low light. "Daniel Harper, stand up." His voice carried authority, unyielding. Daniel didn't move. He curled tighter, like a child hiding under blankets from monsters that were already in the room. The officer repeated, firmer. "Stand up." When Daniel still didn't comply, the officer reached down, hauling him roughly to his feet. Daniel struggled weakly, his sobs turning into frantic pleas. "No! Please! Dad, stop them! Say something! Don't let this happen!" Robert stood still, his face a mask of anguish carved from stone. He didn't move. He didn't speak. The metallic click of handcuffs echoed like a gunshot. Silver bracelets locked around Daniel's wrists. He thrashed once, then sagged, his energy drained, his spirit crumbling. "Dad!" His voice broke into a scream, tearing through the quiet house. "Don't let them take me. Please! I can change. I'll be better. I'll make it right." Robert's throat tightened, his vision blurring with tears. But he forced his voice steady, the words final. "You can't make right what you already chose to destroy." Daniel's face twisted, a howl of despair ripping from his chest as the officers pulled him toward the door. His feet dragged, his body shaking. "Dad!" he screamed again, the sound echoing down the hallway, spilling out the front door into the dying light. "Please! Don't leave me like this." But Robert didn't move. He stood rooted, every muscle rigid, his fists clenched at his sides. He didn't follow. He didn't call out. He let the sound of the door shutting swallow the last cries of his son. The house went silent once more. Empty, heavy, cavernous. The only sound was the faint ticking of the clock, unbothered by the ruin of a family. Robert walked slowly back to the table. He sat down in his chair, staring at the cold mugs of coffee, now untouched and forgotten. His hands trembled as they rested against the wood. For the first time that day, the weight of it all pressed into his chest, threatening to break him. The female officer lingered by the door, her expression softening. "You did what you had to do, Mr. Harper. You gave him chances. He made his choice." Robert nodded faintly, but his voice was hollow. "I gave him life. And he tried to take mine." The officers left, the house sinking into silence again. Robert sat alone in the fading light, his tears falling silently onto the papers still lying across the table. The clock struck 5 o'clock. And for the first time in decades, Robert Harper felt truly alone. The house exhaled a long, exhausted silence after the squad car rolled away. Evening sagged against the windows, dust floated in the gold of the lowering sun. A single trail of water still glistened where Daniel's shoes had scraped the floor. Robert stood in the doorway and watched the street until the red and blue glow disappeared around the corner. Then he shut the door, turned the deadbolt, and listened to the click. Back in the kitchen, the 2 mugs from earlier sat untouched, their thin skins of cooling brown turned dull. The pen camera's tiny red diode above the stove blinked like a patient heartbeat. The salt shaker, quiet accomplice, hit its mic without a trace. Robert reached up, snapped the camera from its clip, and slid the memory card into the pocket of his jacket. He unscrewed the shaker, lifted the bug free, and set it carefully beside the envelope of papers. He rinsed his hands in the sink. Cold water, clean. He let it run a moment longer than he needed. The phone rang. He stared at the handset on the wall until the machine clicked and Detective Marcus Hill's voice filled the kitchen, dry and level. "Robert, it's Hill. We have Mara in custody. Your recordings are clean. She bragged about staging falls before. Your son's call pulled her right into it. She'll be arraigned tonight." Robert picked up. "Daniel?" "In holding. State will charge conspiracy and attempted fraud at minimum," Hill said. A beat softer. "He's not the mastermind here." But he walked himself to the edge. Robert's fingers found the chair back, though it felt worn and trustworthy under his palm. He said men were coming for him. Debts. Hill didn't sigh, but the weight was there. "We've seen that pattern. Mara manufactures urgency, passes a mark between bogus lenders so the fear feels real. There'll be some genuine debt, some smoke. We'll cut through it. But listen, what you did today did more than get us a ringleader." Robert waited. "It removed the payout," Hill said. Publicly. Loudly. No inheritances, no policies. To the wolves sniffing around him, there's nothing to eat. That may be the first good thing Daniel's had in a while. Robert looked at the two mugs. One for a father. One for a son. He turned the faucet until the water hissed hotter and tipped both cups into the sink. Brown spiraled into silver and vanished down the drain. "I didn't do it for them," he said. "I know." Hill's voice was careful. "But you did it smart. If he cooperates, if he gives us names, he's safer inside than out. I'll call when arraignments finish." The line clicked dead. The house took the silence back. A knock came, soft, familiar. Robert opened the door to Evelyn Carter. She'd changed her scrubs for a cardigan and clean jeans, but her nurse's eyes were the same, clear, unsparing. She carried nothing this time. She was just there. "I brought no advice," she said quietly, stepping in. "Just myself." Robert nodded toward the kitchen. She saw the empty cups, the open envelope, the neat arrangement of the collected devices. She pulled a chair and sat. He did the same. "That cup," she said, glancing at the sink. "The dose with alcohol or antihypertensives? It could have stopped your breathing. A fall in the shower would have finished what the sedative started." Robert's jaw tightened. "He called my death paperwork." Evelyn looked at him a long moment. "He also called you Dad." "That word belongs somewhere else today," Robert said. "It came out rough." She didn't press. "What will you do now?" Robert stood and crossed to the cupboard. From the old tin box he withdrew a sealed letter addressed in his block handwriting, to Gregory Shaw, Esq., his attorney. He placed it beside the trust documents. "I'll have Greg file what's already set. The trust is ironclad." Evelyn's eye flicked to the header. "You built protections." "Years ago," he said. When Daniel's eyes started looking past mine and into my pockets. He met her gaze and, for the first time that day, let the hidden truth out in a steady, low voice. "It isn't just a Slayer clause, Evelyn. When Hill called me last month about a fraud ring targeting the elderly, I told Greg to add a trigger. Any whiff of foul play, attempted poisoning, forged directives, staged accidents, automatically freezes disbursements, alerts insurers in the bank, and sends notice to named contacts." Publicly. Loudly. Evelyn absorbed it, slow. The faintest nod. So even if Daniel had managed today, the money wouldn't have moved. He would have fallen into a dry well, Robert said. And every pair of hands reaching for him would have closed on air. He swallowed once, the motion rigid. "I made sure there could never be anything to collect from my death, so he wouldn't be worth killing alive." She looked at him with something like awe and something like sorrow. "You didn't just take revenge. I removed the prize," he said. "From everyone. Including him." They sat in the quiet that followed. Outside, somewhere down the street, a child laughed, and the normalcy of it felt indecent and holy at once. The wall phone rang again. A recorded voice preceded a human one. "This is a call from county detention. To accept, press 1. Robert pressed, and then Daniel's voice, thin, raw, threaded into the kitchen. "Dad?" He didn't answer immediately. The kettle on the stove ticked as it cooled. "Dad, I'm sorry," Daniel rushed on, words tumbling. "I'm scared. They said, there's court tonight. I don't know what to say. I'll say anything. I'll tell them about her, about the messages. Please don't hate me. Please." Robert drew a breath that scraped. "Hate would be easier than this," he said. A small, broken sound crackled through the line. "I didn't see a way out. She made it all feel like the only path. And you chose it over me," Robert said. He kept his voice low, steady. "Listen to me now. I can't stop the state. I won't. But I spoke to Hill. If you give them everything, names, methods, accounts, if you testify, they can move you where you won't be a trophy. You will not be rich. You will not be mine. But you will be alive long enough to learn who you are without money in the room." Silence stretched. Then a whisper, Do you want me to live?" Robert stared at the sink. At the empty cups. At the place where steam had once risen. His throat worked. "I want you to earn it." He hung there a heartbeat, then added, "There's a letter with my lawyer. It sets aside nothing for you. But it funds a small grant in your mother's name for seniors tricked by people like Mara. Every year." Quietly. His voice thinned. "If you want to honor me, you can sit in those meetings when you're allowed, and listen to the damage you helped try to make. And if you don't, then that fund will listen without you." On the line, breathing. Then a sound like the start of a sob strangled into submission. "Okay," Daniel whispered. "Okay." The jail's automated voice cut back in, "You have 30 seconds remaining." Daniel swallowed his last words quickly. "I'm sorry. I am. Tell me what to do." "Tell them the truth," Robert said. "All of it. Then start again with nothing, this time on purpose." The line died. The kitchen took the silence back, deeper now, but different. Evelyn rose. "Do you want company tonight?" "Not tonight." He tried a smile that didn't know how to live on his face. "But thank you for coming." She squeezed his shoulder and left him to the rooms that knew him best. Robert set the kettle on the burner and turned the flame to low. The blue licked quietly at the metal. He reached into the drawer, found the frame he rarely touched, and set his late wife's photograph by the kettle. Her laugh had been caught mid-breath in that picture. Her eyes were the same color as the dusk that gathered now. He measured grounds with the care of a ritual. Water poured, steam rose, the smell of coffee swelled into the room and folded around him. When the cup was full, he poured another out of muscle memory. 2 cups. Always 2. He stared at the second a long time. Then he lifted it, walked to the sink, and let it go. Dark ribbon-down steel, no splash this time, only the soft hiss of hot liquid meeting the cool drain. This was the last, he said to the quiet house. Maybe to the photo. Maybe to himself. He carried his own cup to the table and sat. The pen camera's card pressed a small, hard shape against his chest through the fabric. Evidence, yes, but also a boundary made visible. He opened the letter to his attorney, added one more line with a steady hand. No contact clause for 1 year, revisit thereafter only if testimony is complete and rehabilitation documented. He sealed it and set it with the trust. When he finally lifted the coffee to his lips, it had cooled to something he could hold without flinching. He drank, slow. Outside, the light lowered. Inside, the clock counted it honestly. Revenge had been brewed slow this time, not to burn a throat, but to cauterize a wound. The price was loneliness. The payment was safety. He had stripped his son of inheritance, of easy exits, of predator's interest. He had also left a thin road, narrow and steep, that led out of shame if a man chose to walk it. Robert finished the cup, rose, and rinsed it clean. He wiped the ring it left on the table with the edge of his sleeve until the wood shone again. Then he turned the stove off, kissed 2 fingers, and pressed them to the glass over his wife's smile. The house settled around him, still but not hollow. Justice, served hot. Mercy, measured out in cooling sips. And every consequence, earned.